What if the only child of a nation's president was left to suffer on the streets, hungry, homeless, and unloved, simply because she didn't know who she truly was? This is Bisola's painful story. Abandoned, adopted, and later rejected, she unknowingly crossed paths with her real mother, the First Lady. But how did this happen? And will she ever discover her true identity? Stay with us as we unfold this moving story. And if you're new here, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this. Let's begin. Who took the meat from this pot? Mummy Aduni's voice thundered across the house. Plates rattled as her words echoed like a drum. The twins, barely 5 years old, ran to a corner in fear. Bisola stood frozen by the sink, her small hands still wet from washing plates she hadn't eaten from. I said, "Who took this meat?" Mummy Aduni shouted again, lifting the lid of the steaming pot. Only 2 pieces of meat were left. "I didn't touch anything," Bisola whispered. "You're lying, you ungrateful child." The woman spat. Her hand struck before Bisola could react, a sharp slap stinging her cheek. Tears filled Bisola's eyes, but she didn't cry. She had learned that tears only made things worse. After all we've done for you, picking you from the streets and raising you like our own, this is how you repay us? Mummy Aduni yelled. Bisola wanted to scream. "You didn't take me in out of love but to show off at church." But she kept silent. Her stomach growled. She hadn't tasted meat in weeks. Her adoptive father, Baba Aduni, entered, drawn by the commotion. Adjusting his wrapper, he looked directly at Bisola. "She has to leave," he said flatly. "We warned her. Now she's a thief as well as a burden." "I didn't steal," Bisola pleaded, but Mummy Aduni grabbed her arm and dragged her to the living room. "You think this is your home? That we owe you anything? Let me remind you. We adopted you out of pity when you were 2. Now God has blessed us with our own children. You're no longer needed here. I'm sorry. Please don't send me away," Bisola begged, trembling. Too late. Baba Aduni opened the front door. "Take your things, or rather you have none. Just leave." The twins stared with wide, confused eyes as Bisola was pushed outside. No shoes, no bag, only the thin gown she had worn since morning. The door slammed shut. The lock clicked. She was homeless. Stunned, she stood barefoot on the rough gravel, trying to grasp what had just happened. Her chest rose and fell with silent sobs. Her legs shook. She had nowhere to go. Neighbors peered from behind curtains but said nothing. No one wanted to interfere. She wandered into the night, her stomach empty, her heart broken. For hours she walked aimlessly, dodging motorcycles and stray dogs until she reached a market square. Curling up behind a stack of crates, she shivered as the cold night air wrapped around her. Her cheek still burned from the slap, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. She stared into the darkness and whispered, "What did I do wrong?" No answer came, only the distant hum of a generator. For the first time, Bisola felt she belonged nowhere. Not the streets, not a home. She had no parents, no bed, no real name. Bisola was the name the orphanage had given her. Was it even hers? "Why was I born if nobody wants me?" She cried softly into her knees, careful not to be noticed. At dawn, a woman sweeping the market chased her away with a broom. "Dirty girl. Go back to your parents." "I don't have any," Bisola whispered, dragging her tired legs forward. At a food stall, she begged, "Please, I'm hungry." The woman hissed and turned away. "God forbid I feed a street thief." Bisola collapsed beside a wooden kiosk, too weak to continue. She hadn't eaten for 2 days. Her head ached and her stomach felt hollow. When the kiosk owner arrived, he kicked her leg. "Go before the police come and accuse me of hiding a criminal." She stumbled away again. By evening, Bisola was curled up under a broken shed near a mechanic's shop, looking like a wounded animal. A boy around her age handed her half a bottle of water and a torn piece of bread. She held it as if it were treasure. "Where's your family?" he asked. She stayed silent. He looked at her for a moment. "Street life is tough. Don't die, okay?" Bisola nodded, but inside she had already begun to give up. Her eyes burned as she lifted them to the night sky. Dear God, do I even matter? No answer came. Miles away, a woman who once held her in her arms woke from a nightmare she couldn't explain. The second night on the street was harsher than the first. A storm was coming. The skies over Lagos rumbled dark and heavy as Bisola crouched under a broken umbrella stand near a weak bridge. The wind slapped her thin dress against her bones. Thunder rolled again. She hugged herself tightly, but hunger and cold had already numbed her body. Nearby, some local boys laughed around a fire made from old tires. Their eyes glowed in the dark. One of them whistled toward her. "Hey, Smalley, come sit with us," he called, patting his lap. Bisola stayed still. Another boy rose and started walking toward her. Her instincts screamed. She grabbed her slippers and ran barefoot, heart pounding. She didn't stop until she reached a gutter behind a locked shop. She climbed in, curling between two plastic containers that smelled of soap and rot. Her breaths were shallow. She was only 13, alone, terrified and unseen. By morning, her lips were cracked, her throat burned, and her stomach ached with emptiness. She wandered near a busy food canteen, watching people eat steaming plates of rice and stew. Her nose twitched, her legs trembled. When one woman stepped away to take a phone call, Bisola crept forward and scooped a spoonful of rice. "Thief!" someone shouted. She froze. The woman returned and slapped her before she could explain. A crowd gathered quickly. "Leave her, she's just a child," one man said. "She'll grow up to be a criminal," the woman snapped. "This is how it begins." A bystander handed Bisola a sachet of water. She grabbed it and ran, tears blurring her eyes. She collapsed under a mango tree near the main road, gasping for air. A small boy pointed at her leg. "Auntie, your foot is bleeding." She looked down at a deep scratch but felt nothing. Her heartache was far greater than the wound. That evening, she found a park bench at Alacuco Junction, where an old beggar woman with gray hair and weary eyes sat. "You're too young for this life," the woman said gently. "I was kicked out," Bisola whispered. "You have parents?" "I don't know who they are. My adoptive family threw me out last week," the old woman nodded slowly. "There's something dangerous about being forgotten. It makes you feel like maybe God forgot you too." Bisola lowered her head. The woman handed her a piece of boiled corn. "Eat. You'll need your strength." Bisola chewed slowly, tears falling with every bite. The next day, she tried begging at a car park. She stretched out her hand toward a woman in an SUV. The driver rolled up the tinted window. "You again?" shouted the kiosk owner. "I told you not to beg here." "I'm just hungry," Bisola pleaded, but the man grabbed a stick and rushed toward her. She ran again. Her legs ached, her back throbbed, and her lungs burned. She ended up at a street market, collapsing beside a bucket of oranges. The seller hissed and pulled her goods away. Bisola curled up next to a cement block, trying to sleep. That night she dreamed of a woman in a blue wrapper standing by a river, crying out, "Where is my daughter?" She tried to answer, but no words came, only reaching hands. The woman turned, and for a brief moment her face looked exactly like Bisola's. She woke, gasping, heart racing. Who was that woman? Was she my mother? She had never seen her, never even dared to imagine her face, but something deep inside told her the dream meant something. The next morning she whispered, "I'll go back to where it began." The name came to her like a whisper. All Love Orphanage. She remembered how Mommy Aduni always boasted about her charity. We adopted her from All Love Orphanage. We are not like the others. Maybe, just maybe, they would let her stay even for one night. With her last strength, she walked toward Agege. She didn't know the way but asked at bus stops. A conductor offered her a ride, but halfway through, passengers complained about her smell and he dropped her off. Bisola said nothing. She just kept walking. Meanwhile, in the presidential suite, silence lingered. Doris Okoro, Nigeria's first lady, sat at the edge of her luxurious lounge chair, lost in thought. Her silk robe clung to her frail frame, her once radiant skin now pale with months of sorrow. The television in the background played news of another government project, but she wasn't listening. Her hand gripped a medical report, another disappointment. Another test confirming the same words. Everything appears normal. No medical reason for infertility. Everything seemed normal except her womb remained empty after 10 years of marriage. She tossed the paper aside and buried her face in her hands. A knock followed. "Come in," she muttered. Her personal aide, Angela, entered with concern written on her face. "Ma, you haven't eaten since morning." "I'm fine. You said that yesterday and the day before." "This isn't you." Doris looked up, her eyes swollen and red. "Do you know what it means to walk through hospitals across 3 continents only to hear the same words? Nothing is wrong with you?" "Then what explains this?" Angela knelt beside her. "Sir has been asking after you." "He's worried." Doris gave a bitter smile. "The president has a nation to run. He doesn't need a broken wife weighing him down." That's not true, Angela whispered. You are his heart. Later that night, alone in the bathroom, Doris stood before the mirror and lifted her blouse. She placed a hand on her stomach. Why won't you carry life? She whispered. She remembered decorating nurseries that were never used, buying baby clothes only to give them away, and lying beside her husband pretending to be strong while her heart was breaking. She had gone through IVF, prayed in vigils, fasted, and visited Europe's best doctors. Still, nothing. Tears rolled down her face. 2 weeks later, Doris sat quietly in the office of Prophet Isaiah, a man she had once met at a presidential breakfast. She had long avoided prophets, but this one was said to see beyond appearances. He poured oil into a bowl and stared into it as though it held answers. You've carried guilt for over 2 decades, he said calmly. Doris stiffened. Guilt for what? You had a child when you were just 17, he said without looking at her. The room seemed to spin. I was dating Emeka before he became anyone. I told him I was pregnant. He panicked and left for Lagos to hustle. I was young, scared, and poor. You gave birth, the prophet continued gently, and left the baby by the roadside near a certain place. Doris's hands shook violently. All Love Orphanage, the prophet added, still staring into the bowl. A sound escaped Doris, half sob, half confession. I didn't want to kill her. I just hoped she'd be found, that someone would give her a better life than I could. The prophet looked up. The tears of that abandoned girl still cry out. Her pain has chained your womb. Doris was speechless. You must find her, he continued. She is alive but suffering. Her tears are your burden. But I don't know how, Doris whispered, broken. I wouldn't even recognize her now. Begin with repentance, he said. Then search. Search as though your life depends on it. That evening, Doris sat opposite President Emeka Okoro in their private lounge. She hadn't spoken since returning from the prophet's place. What is it? He finally asked. She looked at him and spoke words she had never confessed to anyone. I had a child when I was 17. Your child? He asked, stunned. Silence. You told me you had an abortion, he said softly. I lied. I gave birth and left her near All Love Orphanage. I didn't know what else to do. He ran his hand down his face, his heart racing. And she's alive? The prophet said she is. All this time, he muttered. We searched for answers, but it was our daughter. Doris broke down. I've lived every day wondering if she survived, if she went to school, if she was happy. And now she's out there alone. President Okoro stood, fists clenched. Then we will find her. We'll use every resource. We'll search this nation. Doris wiped her tears. But what if she hates me? Then we will earn her forgiveness, he said firmly. The next morning, Doris released a public statement. A $1 million bounty for anyone who could help locate her missing daughter. She shared no names, no photos, only this. 22 years ago, I left a baby girl near All Love Orphanage in Lagos. If you know anyone who fits this story, please reach out. You will be rewarded. The news exploded nationwide. Journalists carried the story. Social media buzzed. And speculation spread everywhere. Meanwhile, across the city, Bisola sat beneath a broken kiosk, clutching a torn piece of bread, shivering in the evening rain, completely unaware that the most powerful woman in the country was searching for her. Not just as a savior, but as her mother. By the next morning, Nigeria was in chaos. $1 million was all it took. Every TV screen, radio broadcast, newspaper, and online feed carried the same breaking story. First Lady offers $1 million to find long-lost daughter. Some mocked her, some felt pity, but many saw a chance. From Lagos to Kano, reports poured in. I once worked at All Love Orphanage, a woman told AIT News. There was a girl with a birthmark on her arm. I'm certain she's the one. In Onitsha, an old man stood at his compound gate holding a framed photo of his late granddaughter. She was adopted, he said. Perhaps she's the one. Inside the presidential villa, the First Lady's phone would not stop ringing. Her assistant Angela filtered the calls, struggling to separate genuine claims from scams. Madam, someone in Ibadan says his daughter fits the age and has a similar birth story. Another from Benin says her neighbor's niece was adopted from Lagos and has a mark on her back. Any call from All Love Orphanage? Doris asked. Angela shook her head. Nothing yet. Doris turned to the large map on her wall, a red pin marking Lagos where the orphanage once stood, with a line drawn toward Abuja. We're close, she whispered. So why does it feel like we're still so far? Meanwhile, in a closed session at the Presidential Situation Room, President Emeka Okoro listened grimly to a security briefing. Your Excellency, we've received more than 7,000 calls and submissions in under 48 hours, the DSS director reported. 90% are false or attempts to exploit the reward. And the other 10%? The president pressed, we're still investigating. Some are promising, but the orphanage records from 22 years ago are incomplete. Many were lost in a fire a decade ago. The room went silent. This is like finding a needle in a haystack, one official murmured. Then burn the haystack if you must, the president said firmly. But find that needle. That evening, Doris appeared on national television for an exclusive interview. Your Excellency, why now? The host asked gently. Doris exhaled. Because silence was no longer an option. For years I told myself I acted out of survival, that I had no choice. But the truth is I made a terrible mistake. I must find my daughter, if she's alive, and ask for her forgiveness. The host fought back tears. Do you believe she will forgive you? I don't know, Doris admitted. But she deserves to be found, even if only to hear me say, I'm sorry I left you behind. As the camera zoomed in on her trembling lips, in a small buka in Mushin, a woman paused from washing dishes to stare at the TV. Che, that's the First Lady crying. The man beside her scoffed. She abandoned a child, now she cries? You'll see hundreds of girls claiming to be her daughter. But in a quiet corner of the eatery, a girl sat with a plate of cold jollof rice. Her feet were dusty, her eyes heavy with sadness. Bisola. She didn't know who the First Lady was, but something in that woman's face stirred an old, unspoken memory deep inside her. Back at the villa, President Okoro returned from a press briefing and found Doris alone on the balcony. Crying again, another false lead, she said weakly. A family in Enugu forged adoption papers. He put an arm around her. You're getting closer. These things take time. No, Emeka. What if she died years ago? What if she never even made it to the orphanage? What if someone else took her? He looked into her eyes. Because pain remains where hope still lives. Death doesn't leave this kind of pain. She's out there. Doris broke down in his arms. That night, 2 streets from a crowded market, a woman sat at her laptop scrolling through news stories. She zoomed in on the First Lady's photo, then glanced at a girl she had recently thrown out of her home. Bisola. They told me she was adopted from All Love Orphanage, the woman muttered. She whispered one name, then opened her email. To the office of the First Lady. Subject. I think I know the girl you're searching for. Madam First Lady. This one looks promising, Angela said the next morning, placing a file on the glass table. Doris, exhausted from another sleepless night, lifted her head. She matches the age. The woman who raised her says the girl was left at a church 22 years ago and grew up with the nuns. She even has a birthmark on her arm. Doris sat upright, heart racing. Where is she? In the waiting room. Doris hurried out and entered the parlor. A young woman stood nervously in a floral dress, clutching her bag. Her eyes darted around the room. Doris smiled gently. My dear, what's your name? Rebecca, ma. May I see your arm? Rebecca slowly unbuttoned her sleeve. A birthmark showed, almost exactly in the same place. Tears welled in Doris's eyes until Angela rushed back in. She whispered in Doris's ear, her voice cold. She confessed. She drew it with ink. It's fake. Doris's body went weak. She turned toward the girl, disappointment heavy in her chest. Rebecca burst into tears. I'm sorry, Ma. I only wanted the money. I didn't mean to hurt you. I'm hungry. I've been homeless for months. Guards escorted her out. The doors banged shut against the nearest chair. Another false lead. Another wound reopened. Over the next 3 days, 12 more girls stepped forward. But their stories didn't hold. Some were clearly coached, others were orphans, but the timelines didn't match. Adoption centers had no records. Their accounts crumbled under simple questioning. Dora stopped eating. She hardly spoke. Soon the media began to doubt her motives. Some journalists suggested it was a publicity stunt to gain sympathy. Others speculated she was breaking down under stress. At night, President Okoro sat by her side, holding her hand as she stared blankly at the ceiling. Maybe this is punishment, she whispered. Maybe God has closed my womb forever. Don't say that, he murmured. I abandoned a baby. I threw her away like nothing. Now the whole world is watching me try to fix what I broke. But I can't even find her. What kind of mother doesn't recognize her own child? You were a child yourself, Doris. We both made mistakes. But if justice still exists, we will find her. Meanwhile, in a narrow Lagos alley, Bisola wiped her hands on a rag after washing a mountain of dishes behind Mama Nina's food stall. Mama Nina handed her a bottle of water but no meal. Business was slow. No food today, she said. Bisola didn't protest. She simply nodded and walked away. Her body was shrinking. Her cheeks hollow, her bones sharp beneath her dress. Yet her eyes still carried the will to survive. She had asked around and finally learned the way to All Love Orphanage. She planned to go. She only needed the strength. That night, she slept in an open shed behind a welding shop, curled beside an abandoned mattress. Her dreams were full of shadows and a woman's voice echoed in the dark. Bisola, Bisola. She woke up sweating. The next morning, at the presidential villa, Doris received an anonymous email. Subject: I think I know the girl you're looking for. Her hands shook as she opened it. No name, no location, just a short message. She was adopted from All Love Orphanage by a couple named Aduni and Sunday. They had twins and forced her out last month. She now goes by Bisola. Last seen near Agege Market. Attached was a blurry photo of a thin girl in tattered clothes outside a kiosk. Doris zoomed in. The image was grainy, but something hit her deep inside. The eyes. They reminded her of someone, but she no longer trusted her emotions. Too many times she had been wrong. Angela leaned over her shoulder. Should we trace the IP? Already on it, answered DSS Director Ibrahim. The email came from a public cafe and machine. We've sent officers to question the owner and check CCTV. Doris clutched the photo. Something in the girl's stare mirrored her own pain. Find her, she said firmly, and confirm with All Love Orphanage. Yes, Ma, Ibrahim replied. That night, even as search teams mobilized, Doris stood before her mirror, touching her face, trying to see her younger self. If I do find her, will she forgive me? She whispered. Only silence answered, broken by the ticking clock. Bisola, meanwhile, dragged herself along the dusty roadside. Her thin slippers slapped against her cracked heels. She hadn't eaten since yesterday, a dry biscuit given by a kind meat pie seller. But now her body had reached its limit. Her stomach was empty, her head light, but she clung to one goal: All Love Orphanage. She wasn't sure what she hoped to find. Maybe a bed, a plate of rice, someone who would care. She wasn't even sure if anyone there would remember her. She had been only 2 years old when she was adopted, but it was the only place where she had ever truly belonged, even briefly. Finally, she saw the gate. Faded yellow paint, a cracked wooden sign. All Love Orphanage Home, where every child is loved. Bisola stood there for a long time, gathering strength. Her hands shook as she knocked. Silence. She knocked again, louder. At last, a small square window creaked open. A middle-aged matron in a green wrapper peered out, her eyes sharp and tired. Yes, what is it? Please, Ma, I need help. I used to live here. I was adopted from here when I was 2. I have nowhere else to go. The woman scanned her critically. How old are you? 13. The woman clicked her tongue. We don't take teenagers. Government rules. Only children under 10. Please, Ma, Bisola begged. I've been on the streets. I haven't eaten. I have nowhere to sleep. You think you're the only one suffering? We're full, no space. Go back to whoever left you. I can sweep, wash clothes, anything. I just want somewhere safe to sleep. The window slammed shut. Bisola stood frozen. Then she knocked again, harder, more desperate. Please, Ma. I'll do anything, a voice cried from inside. If you don't leave, I'll call the police, came the reply. Bisola dropped to her knees, arms hanging weakly as her face pressed into the dusty ground. Her body shook as tears streamed down. Meanwhile, across town, the presidential convoy was being readied. Angela entered the First Lady's quarters with calm urgency. Ma, we traced the lead from yesterday. The name matches, Bisola. She was adopted from Olive Orphanage. DSS confirmed it. Doris's heart quickened. And where is she now? We're not sure, but a former neighbor of the Adunis said the girl was thrown out for allegedly stealing meat. Doris flinched. Angela added softly, she's been on the streets since then. The orphanage also confirmed a girl named Bisola was adopted 13 years ago. The record is faint, but the name, age, and location all align. Doris stood firmly. Prepare the convoy. I want to visit the orphanage today. At the orphanage gate, Bisola had slumped to the ground, her body frail, eyes burning, though the sun blazed above her. She felt cold. Inside, younger children peeked through the gate, whispering, "She's crying. She's dirty. She says she used to live here." No one helped. With effort, Bisola rose, leaning against the wall. Her hands trembled, her stomach groaned. Suddenly, sirens pierced the air. A long line of black SUVs approached. The orphanage stirred into frenzy. "It's the First Lady," a nanny shouted. Children rushed into uniforms, staff fixed scarves, banners were unfolded. But at the gate, Bisola remained, too weak to stand, too forgotten to matter. The convoy stopped. The lead SUV door opened. Doris Okoro stepped out, dressed in white lace, flanked by security and aides. Cameras clicked as she waved, then froze. Her eyes fell on the girl at the gate, alone, dirty, crying. Something pulled violently inside her. "Who is that?" she whispered to a guard. "No idea, Ma. Likely another street child." Ignoring the cameras, Doris walked past the crowd and knelt before the girl. "Hello, sweetheart. What's your name?" Bisola looked up slowly, lips trembling. "Bisola." Doris caught her breath. "Where are your parents?"
I don't have any. Where do you live?
"The streets. I came here for help, but they said I'm too old." Doris turned sharply toward the matron. "You turned her away?" "She's not eligible, Ma, over 10. We follow regulation." "I don't care about regulation," Doris replied firmly. "She's coming with me." The matron hesitated, but Doris repeated with finality. "She's coming with me." Turning to the girl, she softened her voice. "Would you like to come with me?" Bisola nodded, uncertain if this was real. Doris removed her white scarf and wrapped it around the girl's shoulders. "Come, my dear. You will never sleep on the streets again." As the convoy left, cameras captured the moment, a homeless girl beside the First Lady. But neither the press nor Doris herself yet knew. The girl she held was her own daughter. In the SUV, Bisola sat silently, wrapped in the silk scarf, hands clasped tightly on her lap. Every bump on the road startled her. Hours ago, she begged for entry into the orphanage. Now she rode in an air-conditioned car with the most powerful woman in the country. Doris glanced at her often. Something about the girl stirred her. Her eyes, her posture, the way her lip quivered when nervous. Angela leaned forward and whispered, "She looks just like you when you were younger." "I noticed," Doris replied softly. At the villa, guards helped Bisola step onto polished marble floors. The chandelier's golden curtains and scented air overwhelmed her. She clutched the scarf tighter. A maid brought clothes, another offered food, but she stood frozen, staring at the chandelier above, fighting tears. "You're safe here," Doris reassured, kneeling beside her. "You don't have to sleep on the streets anymore." Bisola nodded silently. Doris turned to Angela. "Let her rest. Make sure she eats. I'll speak with her later." Hours passed. Wrapped in a blanket, Bisola sat alone in the guest room, watching rain streak across the glass. A tray of untouched food sat nearby. She didn't feel worthy of the bed or the silence. On the streets, she was invisible. Here, she felt exposed. In the next room, Doris and President Okoro sat with DSS Director Ibrahim, reviewing the tip. "She was adopted by the Adunis?" the president asked. "Yes, sir," Ibrahim replied. "The orphanage record confirms a child named Bisola was adopted 13 years ago. The entry is faint but clear enough. No last name, just Bisola." Angela entered with a file. "We also spoke to a nurse who worked there at the time. She recalled the baby was left in a blanket with no note, just a beaded bracelet inscribed with hope." Doris's breath caught. "Hope," she whispered. "I gave her that name in my heart the day I left her. I didn't leave a note, but I whispered to her, 'You are my hope.'" Her voice trembled as she clutched her chest. The president leaned forward. "We can't jump to conclusions, but the facts align. Same orphanage, same year, no record of parents, and her face." He turned a photo toward Doris. Doris's eyes filled. "She looks like me when I was young." That evening, Doris entered Bisola's room with a warm smile. The girl sat up quickly, adjusting her blanket. "You don't need to be afraid," Doris said gently, sitting beside her. "You can talk to me." Bisola whispered, swallowing nervously. Thank you for helping me. Do you remember anything about your life before the Adunes? No, she replied. They just told me I was adopted from the orphanage. Do you know your biological parents' names? Bisola shook her head. Doris hesitated, then gently reached for the girl's arm. May I? Slowly, Bisola extended it. Doris rolled up her sleeve, and there it was, a strange comma-shaped birthmark just above the elbow. Doris's chest tightened. She carefully rolled up her own sleeve. Memeka had often teased her about that exact mark in the same place. Bisola's eyes widened. You have the same thing? Yes, Doris said softly, blinking back tears. I always thought it was rare. Bisola stared, something stirring deep within her. What was your name before they called you Bisola? Doris asked. I don't know. The orphanage gave me that name. I don't remember anything else. Do you remember being left there? Sometimes I dream of a woman crying, Bisola whispered. She says she's sorry, but I never see her face. Doris couldn't speak. Her throat tightened. That night she paced her room. She's the one, she told Amecha. I feel it. I know, he said quietly. But we need proof. Tomorrow, we'll do a DNA test. Down the hall, Bisola lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her fingers brushed the birthmark, and for reasons she couldn't explain, her heart pounded. Something was coming. Something that would change everything. At the presidential clinic, the room was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioner. Bisola sat on the examination table, legs dangling, as a nurse swabbed her cheek and placed the sample into a sterile container. Everything felt unreal. She didn't understand what was happening, only that the First Lady's reaction had shifted everything. People now treated her like glass, fragile, untouchable. Across the glass window, Doris stood with her hands clasped, watching as the nurse collected her own DNA sample. She had barely slept. Fear pressed in. What if she was wrong again? What if her hope was misplaced? Yet deep inside, a voice whispered, "This is her. This is my daughter." 2 hours later, Bisola sat in a private lounge with a cup of hot chocolate, sipping slowly to calm her nerves. She glanced at the polished floors, the gold tassels, the paintings. She still didn't know why the First Lady cared so much. She hadn't asked questions, afraid it might all vanish. Meanwhile, in the private study, President Emeka Okoro held a sealed envelope. Doris stood beside him, barely breathing. Angela and DSS Director Ibrahim looked on in silence. Slowly, he opened it, scanned the page, and looked up. His lips trembled. "It's her," he whispered. 99.9% match. "She's your daughter, Doris." A sound escaped Doris's chest, a mix of laughter and tears. Her legs gave way, and she sank into the couch, clutching her heart, weeping uncontrollably. "I knew it," she cried. "I saw it in her eyes." Angela quietly wiped her own tears. The president placed the report on the table. "She came back to us," he said. Doris stood, her legs trembling. "I want to see her." "Wait," Emeka said gently. "She doesn't know yet. She must hear it carefully, lovingly. No cameras, no protocol." Doris nodded. Angela asked, "Should I prepare her?" "No," Doris said, pressing a hand to her chest. "This is between a mother and her daughter." When Doris entered the lounge, Bisola quickly stood. "Please sit," Doris said softly, taking her hands. Bisola's eyes searched her face, nervous and afraid. "I need to tell you something very important," Doris began, steadying her voice. "Years ago, I had a baby girl. I was just 17, scared, with no money. The baby's father had left for Lagos. I was alone. So I made a decision I regret every day of my life." Bisola sat frozen. "I wrapped the baby in a shawl, whispered the word hope over her again and again, and left her at the gates of All Love Orphanage, praying someone would care for her." Bisola's hands shook. "Hope?" Doris nodded, eyes full of tears. The orphanage named her Bisola. Bisola gasped. That's me. Yes, Doris whispered. You are hope. You are my daughter. Bisola's breath caught. I didn't know until recently. I searched for years, begging God for forgiveness. Then I saw you at that gate and I knew. Tears filled Bisola's eyes, though she said nothing. I don't deserve your forgiveness, Doris continued. But I need you to know that I love you. From the moment I laid you down to this moment, I never stopped loving you. Bisola broke down in tears, collapsing into Doris's arms. For the first time in her life, she was held, not out of duty or pity, but out of love. True, motherly love. Doris rocked her gently, whispering, My baby, my little girl. I thought nobody wanted me, Bisola cried. I thought I was a mistake. No, Doris said, cupping her face. You were never a mistake. You were a miracle. I only wish I had realized it sooner. That night, the presidential villa glowed with warmth. No press, no cameras, just a quiet dinner. Doris sat beside her daughter, feeding her soft rice and chicken. Angela watched from the corner, wiping tears. President Okoro raised his glass of apple juice. To family, to restoration, to hope, our living miracle. Bisola looked around, overwhelmed. This wasn't a dream. She was no longer the girl scavenging in dustbins or begging at bus parks. She was home. 1 month later, in a nationally televised ceremony at the villa, the First Lady launched the Hope Foundation for Street Children. Beside her stood a 13-year-old girl in a sky blue dress, smiling shyly at the cameras. This, Doris said proudly, holding her daughter's hand, is why I started this foundation. My daughter, Bisola, proves that no child is ever too lost to be found. The crowd erupted in applause. From the streets of Lagos to her mother's arms, Bisola had returned, not just as a girl or a daughter, but as a symbol of healing, mercy, and love that never lets go. This story reminds us that no one is too lost to be found. Healing begins when we face our past. Love, forgiveness, and compassion can restore what was broken, turning pain into purpose and rejection into reunion. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Another inspiring story is coming soon, so don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. If you found meaning in this story, like, share, and spread the message. Thank you for watching, and God bless you.